Welcome back, everybody, to Learn with Professor Fiore. I've been away for a little bit, but I had a couple of requests to continue with the Bacon Advancement of Learning, my favorite edition. The these nice little words classic editions from early in the 20th century. The printing is great. You can almost feel the font in the page. You can feel the pressure of the plates in the page. There's just something about it that's so special. So I'm going to make this short because the book breaks up into very small digestible sections. So in itself, the way the book is written, um, you kind of get a picture of how Bacon may actually have taught himself. And it just does not seem like the guy spent time by himself thinking this through. It looks like he's got lots and lots of experience with teaching and learning. There's just too many clues of that in the advancement of learning. So a quick overview of this book in case you don't know it from my other videos is basically written by someone that used to be called the father of modern science. Francis Bacon was the Chancellor of England under Queen Elizabeth, lived at the time of Shakespeare, and the advancement of learning was one of his many philosophical projects for encouraging people to do research that's based on objective observation, experimentation, and what's generally called the inductive method of gathering information and data before you make definite conclusions. So, but the book itself, The Advancement of Learning, turns out to be so interesting while he's actually proving why it's so important to learn, why you shouldn't be afraid to gather knowledge. This is in a time when there's certain kind of cautions around maybe knowledge itself is dangerous. There's kind of biblical questions of whether, it's a form of vanity. So he deals with a lot of this early in the book, and I treat this in my other videos. But in this part, just a short part that I'm going to share screen on here, which is basically the question of what are some things that block people from learning? And this is all part of a longer section. The first, fantastical learning. The second is contentious learning. In other words, partisanship. And the last is delicate learning, by which he means light and superficial forms of learning. So this first is this section here is part of fantastical learning. In other words, learning that goes off in tangents or doesn't get right to the heart of the matter. So I hope you see it here. Maybe I will make it a little bigger so you all can see it a little bit better. I just open it up in Adobe Acrobat. Just beautiful copy. Oh my Lord, this is so amazing. Just the way it looks is incredible. Um, just love the size of it and everything. The color is beautiful. The paper is like this nice rag paper, just the way it used to be. Anyway, this is about 120-year-old text. And here in section 3, and here, he's broken up the argument into really easy to digest little numbers. This is dealing with the subsection of fantastical learning. In other words, forms of learning that are go off on tangents or don't get you right into the heart of the matter. So I'm just going to start with this very, very short paragraph. And he says, here, therefore, is the first distemper of learning. And he's using the word distemper, which is a medical term, when men study words and not matter. So he's worried about jargon, basically. In the 20th century, this was an issue more than maybe it is today. I think a lot of people accept today that we want to make academic reading clear, limpid, easy to understand. This was not always the case in the 20th century. Even among postmodern writers, people that we still read, Foucault, Derrida, definitely very obscure. So he's talking about the general issue of using words that distract, right? So we might read Bacon and say, well, your words distract, reading it from 400 years hindsight, reading this kind of Elizabethan English. But actually, if you were to read this next to Shakespeare or next to a lot of writing of the time, it is itself a model of incredibly clear writing. Men study words and not matter. You can't be Can't be more direct than that. Whereof, in fact, or, to prove this, though I have represented an example of late times, yet it had been and will be secundum maius minus in all time, right? So more or less it has always happened. And how is it possible, but this should have an operation to discredit learning, even when vulgar capacities, when they see learned men's books, like the first letter of a patent or limned books. So here it is basically saying, this using tough words can turn people off. People who are not very learned can be turned off right away by seeing a kind of a waterfall of difficult words. And I know that from friends of mine. Sometimes students will be turned off because a text will have some linguistic challenges. I don't blame them. I mean, you want to read something clear and easy to understand. But sometimes there are certain texts that you can't read any other way. Like the text of it is very, like, I would ask you, if a text is really difficult and it's the only text that gives you that information, what do you do, right? Sometimes you don't have a lot of choices. If you had a choice, you'd read another text that gives the same information and written better. But sometimes, like for example, Newton's law of gravity, it's the only way that the early scientists were able to understand the law of gravity is to read his extremely difficult text. I think it's called Principia Mathematica. So sometimes, you have to kind of deal with difficult texts. But Bacon recognizes that this can be a turnoff, right? Which though it hath large flourishes, yet is but a letter. It seems to me that Pygmalion's friends is a good emblem portraiture of this vanity for words about the images of the matter. So he says, difficult words are a turnoff, but even if you do understand them, they're still just words, right? Like, are they blocking? Are the tough words, is the jargon actually blocking the matter? Right. So here he says the word matter, which today we would say substance, right? Words rather than substance. And except they have of life of reason and invention, to fall in love with them is to fall in love with the picture. So even among the people that do understand them, you might fall in love with the words themselves, or even the style itself, whether it be hard or easy, and then you forget what the matter is supposed to be. So that's a problem of rhetoric, right? A problem of when the words are kind of like an illusion or a kind of a haze over the thing you're supposed to learn. And then he, in his amazing style, he finds that this is not something you can just easily dismiss. You can't just say, well, the words are hard, or the words are, sparkly or whatever. They're distracting you from the substance. He says, there is some value to good words. There is some value to heavy words as well. So he says, but yet notwithstanding, it is a thing not hastily to be condemned. Right? Let's not judge it too quickly. To clothe and adorn the obscurity, even of philosophy itself, with sensible and plausible elocution. So sometimes there is a value to shiny words. And when he says sensible, he means it in the Elizabethan sense of sensational. Is that what he really means by sensible? Appealing to the senses. That's what it means. So he says there is some value to words that appeal to the senses. And then he gives some writers who have done that. Xenophon, Cicero, Seneca, Plutarch, and sometimes Plato even indulges in beautiful wording. Okay. It is too early satisfactory to the mind of man and quencheth the desire of further search before we come. Now, this is the most important part, and I'll end here because I'm trying to keep these videos short. This is an interesting point. Now, the first point in section 3 is about not getting carried away with words, either when they're too complicated or they're too beautiful and brilliant. And because you want to get to the substance of the writing, right? So you've got to be careful not to be led astray by words themselves, right? But here he says, even in the most beautiful writing, even in the most excellent writing, even in the most clear writing, even, there is a danger that you will be too easily satisfied. And this is something that a lot of people don't think about. They think, look, I found this book. It explains the American Revolution in a way that nobody else does. And I've had this experience many times. with great writers on the American history, or sometimes English history. I have my favorite writers. In Italian, I have my Alessandro Barbero, amazing, super great historian who describes things so well. But he says that's actually a danger, because if you're satisfied too easily with an explanation, it quencheth the desire of further search, as it says there at the bottom. And this is actually an interesting concept that I've seen many times in writers all through the centuries, of all genders, of all social classes, this issue of don't freak out if my writing gets hard. Rousseau has said this. Wollstonecraft, the great early feminist. Don't pay attention so much when sometimes my writing goes off on a tangent, because really what we're after is we're searching together. This is a lot of times readers are so passive, right? And they're like, we have a very consumerist idea. Like, I refuse to read the book unless it's great. I refuse to listen unless, if it's boring. Like the idea I've seen so many times that's so interesting and gives you agency and power over reading is take some responsibility for understanding this. Join the writer in this search for truth or search for insight. And don't get satisfied. Even with a great book, don't be satisfied, because you don't want to quench the desire of further search before we come to a just period. And what he means by period means he really means conclusion, right? A conclusion that is a reasonable and rational one. That's what he means by just period. So anyway, I hope this is helpful to you guys. Thank you for listening again. Tell your friends. Write me a comment if you're liking something. Visit me on LinkedIn. Take a look at some of the other stuff I've been doing. Really exciting stuff, working with veterans and military people and helping them, increase their academic skills. ProfessorFury.com. You can see some of the great personal stories of some of the people in the U.S. military. Surprising numbers are from groups of immigrants and all kinds of diversity that you find in the military. That's really inspiring and surprising to some people. But a whole range of things I've been doing. But thank you so much for the people that encouraged me and wanted to hear more about Francis Bacon. So take care, guys, and I will see you soon.